And then also right around this time, there was quite a few of my friends that were professional photographers that started going into using a digital camera on their weddings and then some in the studio work as well. And a lot of them, I know they started off using a camera like the Fuji S1, which had certain limitations, but it was quite good for certain applications. And then came along the Fuji S2 back in 2002, and that's what this is here. Now this is actually, it's a 6 megapixel camera, but in Fuji, they interpolate it as to coming up with a 12 megapixel file, and that's all done internally. And from what I understand, I guess they have a way of grouping their sensors so they're shaped a certain way so they can be close together, yielding a better image, so to speak. So using this camera, then I actually looked at a few other cameras, and then of course many cameras cost much more than the Fuji S2 did. And one of the local camera manufacturers or retail camera stores there in my area let me take one along to a wedding. So I tried that camera. I shot it at ISO 100 and 400, and the 100 images were okay. It was really big and clumsy and awkward to use. And the 400 ISO images that I took with it were really terrible. They were grainy. I was not happy with it at all. And then I saw the results of the Fuji S2, and they were spectacular for the time. And the price was really good also. It was quite a bargain for the other cameras that were out there selling for maybe $1,000 or several $1,000s more. So why was this camera so good? Well, this camera, like I said, I'm still using this camera, but the thing that I like most about this camera is the image quality and the image color for what it is. Yes, it's very slow in focusing, and it only has 5 focusing points. If you can believe that, 5. You know, some of the newer Nikons have, was it 39 or 52, I think. I forget exactly, and this only has 5. But 5 is probably 4 more than I need. So, but anyway, like I said, I'm using this for small products, and I'm helping my wife in her eBay business. So I'm taking the photographs for her while we're actually doing it together. And when I'm taking those photographs, I'm actually setting this camera to shoot at a relatively low resolution. I set it here so I'm shooting in the fine mode, but I'm also shooting so the camera produces I believe it's a 3 point something meg file. So 3 point some meg file for me, shooting for the web or for eBay, is way more than adequate for what I need. So in that case, a 3 meg file is more than enough for doing that type of photography. So even though the image resolution is more than adequate for what I need for the small products that we're photographing, everything else is kind of obsolete. It's very, very slow to focus. However, the focusing, though, is very accurate, but it's slow. And it does have some battery issues also. The batteries seem to not last that long, and it's just a whole lot older technology. But if you can deal with it, you can still get great looking images with that camera. Now, as far as wedding photography goes, that was my bread and butter for many, many years. The file size that you need for a regular album, well, this is actually considered a larger album. I think it's about a 12 by 15 inch book, where most of the albums that we sold were actually about 10 by 10 in size, 10 by 10 inches. So this one's larger. But I think for some of these I was using at the time the Fuji S3, I believe it was, and maybe some may have been done with the S2 as well. So that would be more than adequate for doing wedding albums like these, because your image on there is limited to a certain size. Now, if you're going to be using the newer technology, which has say 12, 18, 24, 36 megapixels, then you have more than adequate. So you're going to be covered easily for what you need. Okay, so what if you're thinking, hey, but wait a minute, I want to create large wall size or billboard size images. What do I need for that? Well, that's going to be, of course, a different story. Now, I remember seeing, this was years ago, at trade shows when, like, maybe a new camera manufacturer had a new camera out, and they would show you that this camera made up this image, and they were gigantic images. So you can actually create, probably with what you have now, you're able to create giant size images. However, there's going to be certain things that are going to determine how great that image is going to be. Well, first of all, you're not going to be able to look at it from arm's length and say, geez, this is really pixelated, because images like that, even if you ever look at a close billboard type image, you see all the little dots on there. But for a distance, they look fantastic, don't they? So keep that in mind. Even though you're going to have some pixelation on there, it's going to really be evident if you're going to be looking at that up close. So these are not meant for up close viewing. But if you're going to be doing that, then of course you want to go into, as I mentioned, full frame or possibly a medium format. And of course the benefits of going that route, full frame also has a larger sensor. Now, larger sensor has a capability of giving you much better image quality, and also has the capability of low light, of giving you much better images at shooting at low light and with higher ISOs at low light. So that's a big plus if you need that type of, or if you're going to be doing that type of photography. Now, going back to my Fuji S2 and S3 days, I had many samples that were 24 by 30s and 24 by 36. I even had a couple 24 or a few 24 by 36s on display at the catering sites that they bring people in, and they can see these images and so on. So it's just a nice touch. But I was able to display large wall, well, not wall size, but 24 by 36 images, framed images showing. And if you looked at those, as a matter of fact, if you held those up close at arm's length, they were fantastic. And I remember seeing a sample on my studio wall, which was 24 by 30 or 24 by 36, also taken with my Fuji S2, because later on I had to look for the file, and I just checked on the file info and it said Fuji S2. However, to get those images though, you have to really use sharp glass. So this particular one was actually taken using my 70 to 200 millimeter f2.8 Nikon lens, and that brings us to another couple of rules that you want to consider. First of all, you want to make sure, number one, that you're going to be using the proper exposure. Exposure is very critical, not as much now as it used to be in the early days, but it's still critical in giving you an outstanding image. Number two is any kind of camera movement. You want to make sure, because say for instance you're going to be making up a large billboard or say a 4-foot by 6-foot image, any slight movement is going to be magnified as we enlarge that image. So you want to make sure that you're going to be holding that camera steady. Possibly you may need a tripod. I always recommend using a tripod almost anyway, except for if you're doing like photojournalism at a wedding, that type of thing, of course, then you can't, it's not feasible. But if your end goal is to come up with a billboard size image, then consider using either a tripod, or a good monopod is good also. So that's another reason, or that's another way that you have to come up with an outstanding image of something that's super clear and also super sharp and exposed properly. So the bottom line to how many megapixels you need is determined by how that image is going to be used. Thank you very much.